Welcome to Ouch. Was that a ghost? This podcast may contain graphic material, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
Help me.
Now that we covered that, here's your host, Liz.
Welcome back. This week I am covering an unsolved museum heist. On March 18th, 1990, in the early hours, as people were still out celebrating St. Patrick's Day, and if you know Boston at all, it's green hats, green beer, and everyone's a little Irish during the pub crawls. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum was being breached by two men dressed as Boston police officers, who pulled off the largest art heist in the world, getting away with 13 pieces of art valued at $500 million. So a little about Isabella, who was the namesake of the museum. She was born in New York in 1840 to a wealthy family. She attended private school, and then she studied abroad in Paris. Through a classmate, Julia Gardner, Isabella met her future husband, Julia's brother, John Jack Lowell Gardner Jr. After marrying, Isabella and Jack moved to Boston, Massachusetts, into the house that Isabella's father bought them as a wedding gift at 152 Beacon Street in the Back Bay. They were ready to start a family. Isabella became pregnant, and tragically the baby was stillborn. Then they went on to have a son who tragically died before his second birthday of pneumonia, and then she miscarried another child. All this grief sent Isabella into a deep depression. Her doctor suggested to Jack that maybe traveling may help pull her out of it. So Jack took Isabella to Europe, Scandinavia, Russia, all over. She visited 38 countries, learning French, Italian, Spanish, all the while keeping detailed journals, taking in all the design ideas and collecting pieces of art along her travels that she brought back to Boston. Isabella loved art, philanthropy, and the Red Sox, which is kind of funny because she was born in New York. But good choice, Isabella. The cultured Isabella marched to the beat of her own drum. Often in the gossip columns, I guess she was an old school Kardashian. She didn't act as society deemed appropriate. A 1912 Town Topics article reads that Mrs. Jack Gardner should resort to such sensational methods to keep herself before the public eye as to wear in public a white band with, quote, "Oh, you Red Sox," in red letters on it, looks as if the woman had gone crazy. With this band bound like a fillet around her auburn hair, she appeared in her conspicuous seat at a recent Saturday Night Symphony concert, almost causing a panic among those in the audience who discovered the ornamentation, and even for a moment upsetting the orchestra members, so that their startled eyes wandered from their music stands. Oh, the horror. Can you imagine her wearing a white band with OU Red Sox on it in public? In 1898, Jack Gardner had a stroke and died at 61 years old, leaving Isabella a widow. After his passing, she went ahead with the plans of the purchase of land to build a museum to showcase the art that she had collected and was taking over their Beacon Street home. The land where she was to build was pretty barren. It was swampland called the Fens. And the construction began in 1899 and was completed in 1901. The building doesn't look like much from the outside, but inside, she filled 3 floors of the museum with her collection of books, sculptures, tapestries, paintings, much, much more, with pieces from Europe, China, all over. The museum opened to guests on New Year's Day of 1903. For decades, she continued to add to the collection. Isabella passed away in 1924, leaving a $1 million endowment to ensure that the museum could be used for the education and enjoyment of the public forever, with a stipulation in her will that none of the galleries should be changed. Nothing should be sold or added. The museum's designed after a 15th century Venetian palazzo with a glass roof. The courtyard inside is filled with flowers and statues from her travels, and a mosaic floor that's said to date back to 117 AD. The museum is breathtaking, with over 15,000 pieces of art. Each room has a different theme or a style, like there's the Blue Room or the Early Italian Room. Each of the 3 floors has multiple rooms with the courtyard visible from all the rooms. So back to March 18th, 1990. The museum had 2 guards working the night shift. Rick Abbott, who was 23, who was a musician by day and a guard by night. And Randy Heston, who was 25, also a musician, I guess, as he brought in his trombone to presumably practice. Because, this job was cake. Nothing ever happened. It was 1 patrol, 1 sit. Overnight shifts are brutal, so maybe this was a reason for him to stay awake. The way the job worked was 1 guard would sit at the desk, monitor the cameras, and the other would perform a walking patrol of the museum, armed with a flashlight and a walkie-talkie. That night, Rick Abbott did the first foot patrol as Randy Heston sat at the desk. During the patrol, some fire alarms went off, but there was no signs of smoke or smell of anything burning, so he went to the fire alarm panel thinking it was malfunctioning, and he silenced it. He got back to patrolling, and before relieving Randy, he walked by the side door, opened it, and then he closed it. And then he went back to the desk, and then Randy started his foot patrols around 1 a.m. At about 1:20 a.m., Rick Abbott saw 2 men at the side door, who appeared to be Boston police officers. He could see them through the camera. They buzzed the door, and according to Abbott, they said, "Boston police, we got a report of a disturbance at the premises." The guards hadn't noticed any disturbance, but it was Boston on St. Patrick's Day. So at about 1:24 a.m., Rick Abbott, against protocol, buzzed the men in. And this was just an entry before the security office, like a little locked foyer. And then he buzzed them in again, so now they were in the museum. They asked if anyone else was there. He told them, yeah, there's another guard. And they told Rick to radio Randy, have him return to the desk. And one of the quote-unquote officers told Rick that he looked familiar. "I think we have a warrant out for your arrest. Come out from behind the desk and show us some identification." Rick Abbott complied, abandoning his post and leaving the only panic button in the museum. Rick was then forced against the wall, placed in handcuffs. And Rick said it was about this time it looked like the mustache of one of the men seemed fake. Once Randy returned to the desk, he was also cuffed. So now that both the guards were incapacitated, the uniformed men announced, "This is a robbery, don't give us any problems, and you won't get hurt." To which one of the guards replied, "They don't pay me enough to get hurt." The men dressed as BPD wrapped duct tape around the guards' hands, feet, and head. The head is a weird one. It went around their head, covering their eyes. So picture from the back of your head around your eyes. But then they wrapped it again from under their chin to the top of their head and around. I don't see the purpose of that one. They then led the guards to the basement, knowing where it was, and they handcuffed them to a bench in a pipe. The men dressed as officers took Rick and Randy's wallets and basically said, "We know where you live," and they told them if they don't say anything, they'll get something in a year. All this was done by 1:35 a.m. They have a timeline how everything happened because they had motion detectors in the museum. Although the security system was about to get a revamp, the motion detectors were still working. At about 1:48 a.m., the thieves made their way to the Dutch room on the 2nd floor. While in this room, a proximity sensor went off, indicating someone got too close to a painting, and then one of the thieves smashed the sensor. In that room, Rembrandt's self-portrait was pulled off the wall and left, presumably because it was on wood and not on canvas. They took Rembrandt, The Storm of the Sea of Galilee, and A Lady and Gentleman in Black. They were both cut out of their frame and taken, as well as a postage stamp size etching. This oddly was removed from the frame. It would have just been easier to take the whole thing, because think of a postage stamp sized painting, how big the frame is. It's not very large at all, but they took the time to take it out. Also from the Dutch room, on the other side, they removed Flink's landscape with an obelisk, Vermeer's The Concert in a goo, which is a bronze Chinese beaker, said to be from around 1100 BC. At 1:51 a.m., one of the thieves entered the short gallery on the other side of the second floor, his accomplice joining him shortly after. While in this room, some screws were taken out of the frame containing the Napoleonic flag, but they didn't take them all out and they left the flag, so they seem to have just abandoned that, and they just took the gilded finial eagle from the flag, like the flag topper. In that room, they also took 5 sketches by Degas. There was also a Monet the Chaise Tortoni taken from the Blue Room on the first floor. What's odd about that is the motion detectors never detected either of the intruders in the room while they were in the building. The only person that was detected in that room was Rick Abbott while he was doing his rounds earlier. On their way out, the intruders peeked in on the tied-up guards and asked if they were comfortable. How considerate. Then they went to the office of the director of security. They took the tapes from the CCTV along with the printout of the motion detection in the building, trying to cover their tracks, but being 1990, they didn't know that there was a hard drive of this information. Also in that room, they left the frame for the Monet that was in the Blue Room that they were never detected in. The door to the museum was opened at 2:40 a.m. and 2:45 a.m. as the thieves brought their ill-gotten gains to the car. The whole robbery took 81 minutes, in which time 13 pieces of art were stolen, valued at $500,000, which is a lot. But going for specific items, they passed a lot of art that was more valuable. Like there were pieces by Botticelli, Raphael, or Michelangelo, while taking the finial or the goo, seemingly focusing on specific items, like they had a shopping list. So when the morning shift arrived to relieve Rick and Randy, they were usually seen on the camera, or they'd buzz the buzzer and they'd be buzzed in. But this morning, nothing. Silence, which was odd. So they called the director of security, who went to the museum and used keys to gain access to the building. Once inside, he saw that the security desk was found empty. The police were called, who arrived approximately at 8:15 a.m. They swept the building from top to bottom, finding the guards tied up in the basement. Photos were taken of the guards and how they were taped up. It was just weird, that around the head thing. I don't get that. And then the police started asking them, like, what happened? What's the description of the men? The men that didn't wear masks or anything, it allowed the guards to see them, but Abbott couldn't remember what they looked like. Between witnesses and what the guards could remember, they gathered that one of the intruders was about 5'9", 5'10", late 30s, white male, medium build. And the other was about 6 feet, early 30s, white male, slightly heavier build. The witnesses that I'm talking about were a male and a female that were passing down the street by the museum, and they claimed that there were 2 men with patches sitting in a blue or gray, dark-colored hatchback next to the museum. And there's a lot of theories, but I'm just going to touch on a few. One of the most popular being that it was an inside job. Rick Abbott, the one that didn't remember what the intruders looked like, even though they didn't have any masks on. And it was strange that Rick opened and closed the door about 20 minutes before the intruders came to the door. Which, I mean, some people could take this as he was doing it to signal, but he claimed he did this all the time to make sure it was locked. But others he worked with claims he didn't, but what do I know? I wasn't there. And the Chaise Tortoni, the painting that was removed from the Blue Room and was stolen, and the motion detector only detected Rick in the Blue Room, not the intruders, was a little sus. And the night before the heist, Abbott was seen on camera letting a man into the museum, and when he was asked about this, he says, "Oh, I don't remember." Abbott passed away in 2024 and never wavered from his denial of having anything to do with the heist. The FBI's response on this is really cold. An agent said that the security guards were too incompetent and foolish to have committed the crime. That's messed up. Another big theory is that the art was stolen to be used as leverage. It's almost a get-out-of-jail-free card. And if you know anything about Boston in the 90s, it was a big Irish-Italian mob place. It was a lot of criminals with mob ties getting locked up, and by having a painting to leverage, you could seemingly get someone right out. Or it could be used as collateral during illegal substance purchases. Another big suspect was Whitey Bulger, the head of the Winter Hill Gang, an Irish mob out of Somerville. He was looked into as the Gardner Museum was in his territory, and Bulger was known to have ties with law enforcement who claimed that Bulger was an informant. Maybe he had access to uniforms. But they never found enough evidence to tie him to the heist, but some still think that Bulger got the art to the IRA and is probably somewhere in Ireland. Within a few days of the heist, a reward of $1 million was posted for the art's return. The FBI ended up running the investigation because the items may have left Massachusetts. What sucks is a lot of key items of evidence, like the duct tape, have gone missing over the years, therefore unable to be retested any more than what they did with it in the 90s. And for 4 years, they just continued to follow leads, but silence, until 1994. The museum's director received an anonymous letter postmarked from New York City. In the letter, they offered information that somehow showed their credibility. The anonymous letter said, quote, "I want to point out that I had no part in the theft and really only became aware of it in the past 6 months. Furthermore, I do not know the identity of the 2 men who did the actual robbery. I'm dealing with a third party. All parties do want a resolution to everyone's satisfaction. You get the collection and they get some money and immunity from prosecution." He went on to say the art was fine, and for $2.6 million, he could get it returned, as long as he wasn't going to be arrested. And he didn't want the FBI involved. The museum's director received another letter the following week, and he wrote that the museum can either get the paintings back or arrest a middleman, in so many words, saying, "You cannot have both." The writer said that they had to think about the exchange to make sure it was confidential, and even if they couldn't figure out some way to work this all out, that they would leave clues as to where the art was. But the museum never heard from this letter writer again. There was another theory that Brian McDevitt may have orchestrated this robbery. He tried to rob a museum in New York in 1981, having some similarities. He put on a FedEx driver uniform, and he was carrying handcuffs and duct tape with plans to rob a Rembrandt. The FBI investigated him, but they couldn't find his prints at the Gardner scene, so they didn't really have anything, and he refused to take a polygraph and ended up moving away. In 1997, the reward was raised to $5 million. The investigation stayed open, and in 2013, the FBI announced that they had identified the thieves, quote, "with a high degree of confidence," that they were members of a New England, Mid-Atlantic-based criminal organization. And they felt that the art had gone from Massachusetts to Connecticut and Philadelphia, but they were still looking for the public's help to get its current whereabouts and get it back. In 2015, the FBI said that they believed both thieves were dead, but didn't release their names. The Merlino gang comes up quite a bit in different sources, some members even casing the museum in the past. The FBI learning of this through their undercover agents. Nothing came of these leads either. In 2017, the reward was doubled to $10 million. And there have been so many leads that go nowhere. They even had a private investigator with an expertise in international art crimes who claims that some of the art may have made its way to Holland and to Ireland. Ireland seems to be a big running theme in this because a lot of the art had horses in them, so they say that Ireland loves horses. Okay. Federal prosecutors have made it clear that if someone returns the items, they will not be prosecuted, as the statute of limitation expired in 1995. I think everyone's worst fear is that the items were too hot and they were destroyed. To this day, none of the work has been recovered, and per Isabella's will, nothing can be moved. So if you go to visit, you can see the empty frames just sitting, waiting for the art to come home. It really is a beautiful museum. From the outside, it really just looks like a building, just plain building. And when you walk in, it's just flowers and art and just gorgeous. And it's very inexpensive. I think it's $20 or $25 to go in. And you can go in for free if your name is Isabella. Again, I only touched on some of the theories or suspect, but there are a lot. And hopefully one day the art will be returned. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you need more content or just want to help support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com and search Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you need some schnazzy merch, you can find it at crowdmade.com by searching Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you have a story you'd like to share, you can email it to ouchwasthataghost@yahoo.com. You can also find us on Facebook and all the other social media platforms under Ouch, Was That a Ghost?
Help me.
All links can also be found on ouchwasthataghost.com.